In our previous exploration of Sheba and Dedan, we examined their genealogical origins and prophetic significance in Ezekiel and Isaiah. However, biblical genealogy presents an even broader network of migrations, trade, and cultural exchanges between Africa and Asia. One striking pattern is that Shem's descendants often bear names previously found in Ham's lineage, particularly those from Kush. This suggests that Kushite influence, whether through trade, migration, or cultural prestige, shaped later Semitic naming traditions. Additionally, Shem's descendants seem to settle in regions where Kush's lineage had already established themselves, further reinforcing cultural blending. Furthermore, names like Havilah and Ophir hold deep biblical significance, appearing in Genesis, Kings, and prophetic texts. Their presence in multiple genealogies suggests historical interactions, trade, or shared territories between Hamitic and Semitic groups. The challenge of identical names in biblical genealogy: proximity and shared trade networks. Many descendants of Ham and Shem settled in neighboring regions, particularly in Arabia and the Middle East. Ancient trade routes facilitated interaction between Kushite merchants and Semitic tribes, leading to shared naming traditions, intermarriage, and cultural exchange. Some scholars suggest that Hamite and Semitic groups intermarried, leading to cultural blending and similar names. Trade alliances likely contributed to this phenomenon, further complicating genealogical distinctions. Havilah, a land of gold and biblical significance. Havilah's presence in Genesis chapter 2, verses 11 to 12, describes Havilah as a land rich in gold, bdellium, and onyx, placing it near the Garden of Eden. This suggests that Kush and Shem's descendants were in proximity to Eden, reinforcing their early settlement in Africa and Arabia. Havilah's genealogical overlap. Ham's lineage. Havilah was a son of Kush, who was a son of Ham, as mentioned in Genesis chapter 10, verse 7. Shem's lineage. Havilah was a son of Joktan, who was a descendant of Shem, as noted in Genesis chapter 10, verse 29. The older Havilah in Ham's lineage suggests that Kushite influence shaped later Semitic naming traditions. Theories on Havilah's location. Some scholars place Havilah in Arabia, near the Persian Gulf. Others suggest a location in northeastern Africa, possibly Ethiopia or Eritrea. The mention of gold deposits aligns with regions known for ancient mining and trade. Ophir, the gold connection and prophetic significance. Ophir's presence in biblical texts. 1 Kings chapter 9 verse 28 describes Ophir as a land famous for its fine gold, sought after by King Solomon. Job chapter 28 verse 16 references Ophir's gold as highly valuable, reinforcing its reputation. Ophir's genealogical placement and connection to Sheba and Havilah. Shem's lineage. Ophir was a son of Joktan, who was a descendant of Shem, as noted in Genesis chapter 10 verse 29. Joktan's lineage includes Sheba and Havilah, both associated with gold-rich territories and trade. This means Ophir was part of the same migratory and trade expansion that involved Sheba and Havilah. Sheba's trade extended into Africa, particularly Ethiopia, reinforcing the possibility that Ophir's gold sources could have been in East Africa. Theories on Ophir's location. Some scholars place Ophir in Arabia, near Yemen. Others suggest India or East Africa, based on historical trade routes. The Phoenicians and Israelites sought Ophir's gold, reinforcing its economic importance. This close connection between Ophir, Sheba, and Havilah explains why some traditions place Ophir in Africa, despite his Shemitic lineage. Joktan versus Jokshan, two figures, one Afroasiatic connection. Joktan from Shem's lineage is the son of Eber and the brother of Peleg, as mentioned in Genesis chapter 10, verse 25. His descendants settled eastward and are linked to southern Arabia. Joktan is associated with Khatan, the progenitor of South Arabian tribes. On the other hand, Jokshan, from Abraham's lineage, is the son of Keturah, Abraham's third wife, as noted in Genesis chapter 25, verses 1 and 2. His sons, Sheba and Dedan, were linked to Arabian and African trade, possibly interacting with Kushite and Semitic groups. Both figures represent ancient migrations between Africa and Arabia. Their descendants contributed to trade, language development, and cultural exchanges. The presence of Sheba in both lineages reinforces the naming influence of Kush. Engagement question for readers. Where did the Queen of Sheba come from? Given that there are 3 Shebas, one from Joktan, Shem's lineage, one from Jokshan, Abraham through Keturah, and one from Rama, Kush, Ham's lineage, where do you think the legendary Queen of Sheba came from? What does her lineage tell us about her origins? Reference to an earlier biblical mystery. The themes explored in this article help clarify biblical mysteries, such as the question of Moses' wives. In a previous article, Shem in Africa, we examined whether Moses had 2 wives and explored the identity of Zipporah, who was the daughter of a Midianite priest. Since the Midianites were children of Abraham through Keturah, Zipporah was a descendant of Shem, yet she was called an Ethiopian, reinforcing the Afroasiatic blending of identities, just like Sheba, Dedan, Havilah, and Ophir. Zipporah's story is another example of how cultural interactions and migrations shaped biblical identities, further highlighting the deep connection between Africa and Arabia. Expanded conclusion. Reconsidering the location of Eden. While many biblical scholars associate Eden with the Fertile Crescent, particularly around Iraq and the Euphrates, there is another compelling perspective. In the Afro-Arabian region, which includes North and South Arabia, Mesopotamia, and Egypt, the only place explicitly called Eden today is the Gulf of Aden, located near East Africa and southern Arabia. This aligns with previous discussions in this article. The Gihon River is identified as the Nile, which flows through Ethiopia, as mentioned in Genesis chapter 2, verse 13. Havilah's gold-rich land, referenced in Genesis chapter 2, verse 11, strongly points to southern Arabia and East Africa rather than northern Arabia near Mesopotamia. The proximity of Kushite and Shemitic settlements suggests that Eden's location may have been closer to East Africa and southern Arabia rather than the traditional Mesopotamian interpretation. Beyond biblical references, Egyptian history itself supports the idea that early civilizations in the Fertile Crescent may have originated further south, near the source of the Nile. Ancient Egyptian traditions reference Nubia to Seti as a land of ancestral significance. Archaeological findings at Nabta Playa suggest early settlements in southern Egypt near Sudan. Genetic studies indicate that early Egyptians had North African and Sub-Saharan African ancestry. These findings further reinforce the argument that Eden's location may have been closer to East Africa and southern Arabia rather than Mesopotamia. Beyond biblical references and Egyptian history, archaeological discoveries in East Africa provide compelling evidence that human origins, and possibly Eden, were in this region. Fossils and tools dating back 1.5 million years at Olduvai Gorge, Tanzania, show early human activity and advanced cognitive abilities. A 78,000 years old burial site in Kenya suggests complex social behavior among early humans. Genetic and fossil studies confirm that Homo sapiens originated in Africa, with the oldest known human fossils found in Ethiopia. These findings align with biblical descriptions of Eden's location near the Gihon, Nile, and Havilah's gold-rich land, reinforcing the argument that Eden was in East Africa. Insights from the Book of Jubilees on biblical migrations and Eden's location. The Book of Jubilees, a lesser-known ancient text, offers fascinating insights into the migrations of Noah's descendants and the potential location of Eden. Let's explore these intriguing details. Firstly, according to Jubilees 7:1, Noah's Ark landed on Mount Lubar, one of the Ararat Mountains. This indicates that Noah's sons initially settled close to Mesopotamia and the Fertile Crescent, reinforcing the idea that they did not immediately spread far. Shem, one of Noah's sons, stayed close to Noah, while Ham and Japheth built separate cities in the same general region. The Book of Jubilees emphasizes that dispersal only happened after the Tower of Babel, meaning all of Noah's descendants remained close until the division of languages. Jubilees chapter 10, verse 18 to 30 confirms that people moved into their partitioned lands only after their tongues were confounded at the Tower of Babel. While Cush's Havilah may have explored or scouted his region, full settlement only occurred after Babel, meaning the two Havilahs were not separated by a vast timeline. This reinforces the pattern of Cushite names appearing before similar Semitic names. Interestingly, Jubilees chapter 8 verse 11 to 12 states that Shem's portion included Eden and all the Red Sea territory. This challenges the common belief that Africa belongs solely to Ham, since East Africa, bordering the Red Sea, was part of Shem's territory. Additionally, Jubilees describes the Gihon River Nile as the boundary between Shem and Ham's lands. This means that East Africa, east of the Nile, belonged to Shem, while West and South Africa were part of Ham's land. Jubilees 8:22 states that Ham's land was described as being to the right of Eden, implying that Eden was to the left within Shem's territory. Jubilees 8:16 confirms that Eden was in the southernmost portion of Shem's land, strengthening the argument that Eden was in Africa, not Mesopotamia. Since Shem's land included all the Red Sea territory, Eden's location aligns with East Africa near the Nile, Gihon, and the Gulf of Aden. Furthermore, Jubilees 8:22 describes a mysterious sea into which everything not destroyed descends. Could this be the South Atlantic Ocean, historically difficult to navigate? The Bermuda Triangle phenomenon and challenges in crossing from South America to Africa make this an intriguing possibility. We pose the question to you, our audience. Does the Sea of Mawuk remind you of the South Atlantic Ocean? Could the Book of Jubilees be referencing a real maritime mystery? Lastly, Jubilees 8:19 states, "And he knew that the Garden of Eden is the Kodesh of Kodeshim, and the dwelling of Yahweh, and Mount Sinai the center of the desert, and Mount Zion the center of the navel of the earth. These three were created as Kodesh places, facing each other." Could Mount Kenya, sitting directly on the equator, align with this biblical description of Mount Zion as the navel of the earth? Some historical maps and African traditions suggest that Mount Kenya was considered sacred, possibly linked to biblical interpretations. The River Tana, originating from Mount Kenya, was historically referred to as River Zion in Old Portuguese maps. While this remains speculative, it invites further exploration into African sacred geography and biblical connections. As we delve deeper into these ancient texts, we uncover more layers of history and mystery that challenge our traditional understanding of biblical events and locations.